Welcome to World Travel Made Easy with Itinerary Boss, the podcast where we dive deep into insider tips, travel hacks, and the best ways to explore the world smarter. I'm your host, Ross. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting your next getaway, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's episode, I've got something special for you. Head over to itineraryboss.com to grab your free resource to get you started traveling smarter and quicker. And it's all yours to help you make your next trip unforgettable. Don't also forget to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube so you never miss an episode. We've got new travel tips, interviews, and destination inspiration coming your way every Wednesday. And if you enjoy the show, don't forget to share it with a friend and give us a rating and review to help more people travel. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Itinerary Insider at itineraryboss.com, where you'll get all the latest episode releases, blog posts, as well as exclusive credit card sign-up bonuses, my travel must-haves, and travel hacks delivered straight to your inbox. Let's get you traveling smarter. And now, on to the show. Today, we have on a guest, Val Clemens. And the reason I brought her on is she's a seasoned tour guide who's gotten the chance to work in Alaska, Guatemala, Central America, as well as all over the US, giving tours, and also now works within the travel industry and thought she could bring on a lot of different perspectives and valuable insights. How's it going, Val?
Hey Russ, how are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you joining. And I know, we met through one of my good friends, Nick Burton, and then a couple other, well, Nick was on the podcast, but also a couple other previous guests, Nikki Strutzel and Ruba. I'm so excited. They were the people who said, you need to interview Val. She can provide a lot of insight. So would love to just get your background. I don't want to sell you short for my introduction, but yeah, would love to hear more about your background and everything you've accomplished and done.
Awesome. Sounds good. So let's see. Well, I grew up in Northern Virginia, together, went to high school with the folks that you mentioned before. Went to university here in Virginia and then moved to New York for a year after graduation, lived there, loved it, but really felt like I wanted to experience of more of everything. I mean, I knew I was 22 and youth is fleeting and once you are more settled in your career, and I wanted to definitely get married and start a family at some point. It's like it's not never going to be as easy. So anyway, decided to quit my job in New York and I went backpacking in Southeast Asia with one of my dear friends, Ruthie from UVA, and we just stayed in hostels and lived on, we spent around like $1,000 per month on everything, like all food, all accommodations, all activities. We just stayed in hostels, so it was pretty affordable in Southeast Asia. And just absolutely fell in love with traveling. Had to come back to the US because I ran out of money. So, that happens. And came back and was thinking about what job I wanted to go into, and I did not really know. So I said I want to keep traveling, but also be working. So I moved down to Guatemala. I actually have family in Guatemala. My mom grew up there. My dad is half from Guatemala, so I had already been to the country a lot, but I had never worked in a nonprofit. I had only ever visited like as a tourist, so and seeing family. So this was um, I got a job working at a nonprofit organization in Lake Atitlan, Guatemala. So this is an area that's over 80% indigenous population. Despite how beautiful Guatemala is as a country, and how much it has to offer, it is definitely one of the most impoverished countries in the world. It has the third highest rate of childhood malnutrition. So there are a lot of issues. And I worked at a nonprofit that kind of helped the indigenous population to alleviate some of those issues. Did that for about 2 years or so. Was ready to come back to the US, but still didn't really know what I wanted to work in. So I started looking online and found a job as a tour guide in the Southwest United States. So I said, let's try it. Sounds like fun. I can come back to the US, work, but also still get to travel. and did that for about 3 seasons. So essentially, I would just drive a 13 passenger van with a trailer attached, and I would tour. It was mostly Europeans that we did in the first few seasons. Mostly Europeans are just wanting to come to the US, experience the beauty of the Southwest, lots of California, Arizona, Utah, national parks, state parks, and go on hikes with them and drive them around. And, we camped and I would cook dinner for all these folk, get to meet them, hear about their countries and themselves and their travel experience. And, Europeans are definitely more or better traveled than most Americans. Just, I mean, lots of reasons, but I think one of the primary ones is that you're in Europe, they just have more vacation days. Um, that's just the culture there, so they have more time to travel. But anyway, loved meeting people from other places in the world, and then also seeing so much of the United States, and ended up doing that in Central America. I went back to Guatemala to work as a tour guide, and then I went and did that until the pandemic hit. And then in 2020, moved back to the US, became a teacher for a couple of years, moved back to Charlottesville, where I currently live now. And then through a friend, I actually met the owner of my current company. So now I work for a company called Grand Classroom. We work with teachers and schools all over the country to plan student trips. So I'm definitely more on the office side and itinerary and pre-planning and logistics. But it's just super cool getting to kind of combine my background in education with my experience and my passion for travel, and getting to create awesome excursions and trips for students from all over the United States to experience this at a younger age, which is definitely just a lot more influential and I think crucial for those developmental stages of youth. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Sorry if that was extremely long, but
No, 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 no. That was great. I mean, right off the bat, right? It's good to share that background because you have credibility and you've done this for a number of years and you've done it from a bunch of different diverse experiences, right? It wasn't just tours within the US. It's been kind of all over. So you've, like you said, you like pairing your education background also with travel, and that's what's led to you to your current job and really helping people get started early. And I think that's one of the biggest things that it has an impact, on people when they do travel is, and I think you mentioned it, is you started staying in hostels on $1,000 a budget a month, which, now we're like, oh yeah, we can swing. We want to get maybe, nicer places to stay sometimes, but that's exactly how, I got started staying in hostels, studying abroad in Ireland. When we went over to Europe, it was always, how do we go on this specific budget? Let's stay in hostels here. How do we figure out how to stay with points everywhere and other places? So yeah, I mean, it's really cool what you've done, as well as, getting people started earlier and helping people get some of those life-changing experiences as memories is great. So no, I love that introduction, love the background, and would just love also to hear. I know you gave like your current background from starting after school, but how did your love for travel begin? Was it then, or when you were a lot younger, were there other experiences that kind of had an impact beyond that?
yeah, I think so. I mentioned before I have family in Guatemala, and my parents, my mom especially, is from there. So that was the only place that my family really traveled to when I was growing up, and it was amazing, and I absolutely loved it. But because my mom had so much family there, they were not, every time we went on a vacation, it was like to go see family in Guatemala. So that was kind of the only travel that I knew up until when I went to Southeast Asia after I graduated from college. But I think that even ever since I was younger, I just, I loved learning how to speak Spanish and just being in a culture that was very different than my own here in the United States, and just being able to experience different mentalities and all of just the little differences that I can find. I'm a very curious person, like always thinking and asking questions and reflecting. So I think ever since I was a little girl, I was always like that as well. And I loved being able to, yeah, just see different places.
Yeah, no, no, that makes complete sense. I think you've had so much experience traveling. It would just be good because a lot of the times, and you bring up a great point, right? Like asking questions, being curious, wanting to understand different cultures, and just kind of being a lifelong learner. I think sometimes people don't carry that same mentality, but for people who might be, getting out of college, are a little bit older and are like, hey, you know what? I want to start traveling. Like, what would you, and I'll share some of my favorite things, but I think it'd be good just to hear from you since you have so many different experiences, across the world, but in different jobs too. What's your favorite part of traveling? And then how do you feel like it's kind of shaped your overall interactions with others?
Hmm. That's a very all-encompassing question, but it's a great one. I mean, there's so many different parts of traveling that I love, but I think just to elaborate on what I was saying before, I just love experiencing what there is in the world and, just being able to watch other cultures and see other people and just point out the differences, communicate, learn different languages, kind of read body language in different ways, and also learning about the history of each place and why things in their history, whether it's political history or their specific position in geography, just learning or trying to deduce how all those ways that people are could be affected by their past. And yeah, I feel like I only answered one part of your question.
No, no, no. I feel like that was
Oh, how
good
it's
because
good.
no, I was gonna say just even if it's like, but I think you said it just then was just being able to read other people's body language and things like that. Like that's how it impacts sometimes your different interactions with others. So I think that no,
Mhm.
that answers it. Because sometimes, like for example, when we've gone to Europe or other countries, if we don't know the language, say for example in Croatia, right, being able to read different body languages. Luckily, most of the times tour guides, speak English, but if you don't, right there, right, you're able to read body language, which I think is key, especially when you're working tours within the U.S. Sometimes when Europeans are traveling here, and most times they know English, but I think that's key for you.
Yeah, and also just going off of that, being able to read the world around you, it's not just body language, but just being able to try to perceive what's going around you. Of course, that's also going to help you in staying safe anywhere you are. Um, and it's applicable to so many other parts of your life. It's something that we do in our daily lives when we're at home working all the time as well. So just, I think it's definitely like increased my perception and my ability to kind of read situations and read other people and just kind of be aware of the world around you.
Yeah, 100% dealing with adversity because sometimes when you're traveling, you have things that come up that you weren't planning for. And then being able to deal with that, I think helps, if you're organizing trips and helping others from a tour guide standpoint, but that then helps you in other aspects of your life, planning out, not only trips, but just in any other aspects, which is great. So
For
I
sure.
would love to hear because I know you have a really diverse background and you've gotten the chance to work as a guide in many different places, but Guatemala, I know you're planning your upcoming wedding there. You've been going there for a while, as well as you were in Alaska as a tour guide. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more if you want to dive into both of those areas, just like what if you're traveling there for the first time, what might be some must see places for people,
Mhm.
maybe some hidden gems that aren't all
Yeah,
over social media, and then any other tips or tricks that you have.
definitely. Um, I'll start with Guatemala. So I worked there as a tour leader. I started in just before the pandemic, so about November 2018 or so. And um, all of the places, of course, that I had that I went to on the tours with my guests are places that I had visited previously during my travels and time living in Guatemala. But The most common, so the best place to visit in Guatemala, like if you're coming for the first time and you're staying for, let's say, a week or 10 days or even just 5 days, Antigua is kind of definitely the number one place I would recommend. As you mentioned, it's where I am currently planning my wedding with my fiance. It is in February 2025, so we are getting close to that, but it's a former Spanish colonial town. It's all cobblestone streets. It was built during the Spanish colonial times. It's currently a UNESCO World Heritage Site. All the buildings are one story. They are all painted in kind of more traditional colors. That's protected as part of the UNESCO Heritage Site. And there are 3 volcanoes that surround the city. So any direction that you look in town, there's volcanoes. It's super small. It's only about a mile by 1 mile, and it's a hub for visitors and for locals alike. I mean, there's tons of really super cute, like Spanish colonial style hotels. It's all like open air, outdoor. Like every building has a really nice courtyard, so you're outside almost the whole time, it feels like, when you're there. And it's extremely beautiful, and I highly recommend it. And aside from that, there is a beautiful lake called Lake Atitlan. So this is where I lived. It is an area of the town that's more rural, or sorry, an area of the country that is a lot more rural. As I mentioned previously, the population in this area specifically is about 98% indigenous Guatemalan. So it's a great opportunity to interact with some extremely, ancient cultures. These are people who still practice today their Mayan religion and their Mayan customs, even the languages. There are definitely over 15, maybe if not over 20 Mayan languages that are still spoken in Guatemala today. And the older generation, a lot of them don't even speak Spanish because they've just only spoken Cachiquel or Quiche, one of their Mayan languages. So it's super interesting. They still wear their traditional garb as well. The women have these long skirts. They're all hand woven or woven with a foot loom. The women all have blouses that have embroidery on them. And if you know the areas, like, you can tell where a woman is from by just the colors and the designs and the type of embroidery that are on their blouses. So yeah, and it's just beautiful culture, beautiful people. The lake itself also has 3 volcanoes around it. There's great hiking. There's 12 different indigenous Mayan villages that are dotted around the lake. So depending, like, you can take a boat across the lake to visit another village. They all have their own little charm or little characteristic, and there's even different Mayan languages that are spoken from one town to across the lake at a different town. So again, great place to kind of see something really authentic and close up and personal. So yeah, and Guatemala is only, well, I live in the DC area. So from Dulles Airport, you can find direct flights every day it's only about 3.5 to 4 hours to get there. And then on the way back, it's a little bit longer, but also you can find direct flights easily. Super affordable once you're there. The flights are also affordable. So it's just a great spot. I think that a lot of people don't know about, and granted, I think a lot more people, especially with Instagram and social media, people are traveling there. It feels like more, but especially American people, there's always Europeans and Europeans traveling there. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I mean, see, I learned something new just from this conversation. I mean, I had a buddy who just went there he just did solo travel for a remote work trip, and he was like, I'm going to go down to Guatemala. And I know for us here in Charlotte, we have a lot of direct flights into Central America and some into South America and in Mexico. And I think that's good to know from Dulles. That's one of the places you can get a direct flight from. Where from Dulles can you get a direct flight from, just in case people are curious and want to travel from Dulles there?
Yeah, so the only international airport in Guatemala is in Guatemala City, which is the capital city. So it's about an hour drive, give or take, depending on traffic, to Antigua, the Spanish colonial town that I was talking about. And then from Guatemala City, it's about a 3-hour drive to the lake. So that's why, like, if you had 5 days or a week or 10 days, like, those 2 areas would be my top recommendation. But if you had longer or were wanting to visit a second time, there are so many other beautiful places that are accessible in Guatemala. I mean, granted,
a lot of the country is undeveloped jungle, so a lot of it is not accessible, but
Yeah.
within what is developed and accessible, there's so much to see and do. So also in the north of Guatemala, if anyone is particularly interested in archaeology or Mayan history, there is the Mayan temples Tikal that are in the north of the country. So you can travel by road as well from Guatemala City. It's a really long day. It's about 14 hours on like a little micro bus. So you can also fly from Guatemala City Airport, and it's only about a 40-minute flight, super close. But anyway, it's a beautiful park where you can see Tikal is the name of it, and you can see Mayan temples and take a tour around the park. And there's tons of wildlife as well. Like there's, if you're really lucky, you can maybe see a jaguar at night. That's extremely rare, but more commonly seen would be like howler monkeys. If you stay in like a jungle lodge there, you'll hear the howler monkeys like all throughout the night and in the morning, just like shouting through the jungle tops. Super cool. But yeah, it's a great chance to learn about the Mayans and how amazing and how developed their civilization was. So that's another top spot.
Nice. No, that's really helpful. See, this is helpful for especially for me too, when we do plan to, if we go to Guatemala, can go back and listen to this and take experts' advice, which is awesome. Yeah, we did the Monteverde cloud forest, and that when we were in Costa Rica and got to see we saw some spider monkeys, but other than that, that was kind of the closest we've gotten to that type of wildlife. So that's pretty cool. For what about if someone's going to Guatemala? I know you said, the 14-hour trek up if you want to go to the north part, but if they're just have 5, 7, 10 days and they're wanting to fly into Guatemala City and then go around, would you suggest renting a car, or would you suggest booking like tour excursions? What would your suggestions there be?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I definitely would not recommend renting a car. It's just really complicated and not necessary because since tourism has gotten pretty big there, and has always been with Europeans, as I mentioned, but there's tons of like travel agencies that you can just purchase a seat on a microbus that will take you, there'll be other tourists on there. It's super affordable because you're sharing that transport with other people. If you wanted to go a little more comfortably, you could also hire a private car to drive you, or which still is very affordable compared to like the distance that
Mm,
if the distance that you're traveling. So yeah, I think that would be the way to go rather than renting a car.
okay. No, that's helpful. I think those are some of the biggest questions I always get when people are mapping out trips are, where can I fly into? Do I need to rent a car? What are excursions and tours? Where do I stay? So I think that's having those answers really helps. And then that gets people over the hump of not booking. I think people sometimes they look at planning a trip and are like, okay, I got to do these 10 things versus saying, okay, first I just need to book my big flight. Then I need to figure out transportation, where I want to go, where am I going to stay? And then after that, it's like, then you can do the small things. But I think that's extremely helpful for Guatemala because I haven't been, so I can't give that guidance. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing those insights.
And then if I could just share one more thing that is particularly of interest for anyone visiting Guatemala who's really interested in having or not a more, I should say, a very active activity. So there's this volcano that you can hike. It's just outside of Antigua, and it's called Acatenango, and it actually shares the base with another volcano that's called Volcan Fuego, but then they each have their separate peaks. Volcan de Fuego is active. It's currently active. It's been several years now that it has been active. It's not 24/7 that it is active, but it goes through spurts. Like it'll be heavily active for 2 weeks, and then it might take a break for a week, and so kind of unpredictable in that way. But anyway, you can hike the volcano Acatenango. So when you're at base camp, it feels like you're pretty much right next to the peak of the other volcano that is active. So if you're lucky, you can have a lava show right outside of your tent the entire night and just get woken up by the booms of the volcano, of the lava spewing out of the volcano. And so it is a really tough hike, excuse me. And you can elect to stay in a more basic tent when you're up there, but since it's gotten pretty popular, there are now some companies that have built like little cabins up there, so you don't have to, you can get a better night's sleep. And it's very cold because the elevation is, I think, around like 12,000 feet. So it's super cold overnight, but it's an epic experience. And I would highly recommend it for anyone who has confidence in their physical ability to to complete it. But yeah, there's also people you can hire to carry your luggage. So if you just want to do the hike and don't worry about bringing all your, some companies will offer that as like part of the whole package, they'll carry all your food and your water. So it doesn't have to be as bad as it sounds. It's not that terrible. However, the rewards and the payoffs that you see, just, even if I've gone on it a couple of times when the volcano was not active. So people will be like, oh, that's such a bummer. Like, oh, that sucks. But it's still absolutely incredible, seeing sunrise and sunset up there. You look out around you in the distance and all you can see are the peaks of like 12, 15 different volcanoes that are all scattered around Guatemala, just pointing out above the cloud line. And if you look in the far distance, you can also see the coastline, which is just, one of those moments where you're just like, wow, this is a freaking beautiful place and this is a beautiful earth that we live on. It's those moments that really give you, I think, appreciation for nature and beauty. And that's, of course, a big reason why I travel as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds sweet. I mean, you already sold me. I want to go for sure. Yeah, we did La Fortuna in Costa Rica this past February and did the hike around it, which was awesome, but not an active. It wasn't active, and then they don't have 12 to 15 volcanoes where you're looking out over the over the sunset, sunrise. So
Yeah,
yeah, no, that sounds awesome. So
it's pretty epic.
when you're going up on the hike, because this has me curious. So when you do that, and you said you can, hear the booms and see like lava flowing by, it's, I guess, where they've like built the cabins or where you're staying, you're safe from the
Mhm.
volcano.
Yes, you're
Okay.
safe from volcano. It's at a safe distance, but it just feels like it's super close. Like it feels like you're right on top of it, but you're actually
Okay.
not. Like there, you can go hike to it as well, which I've never done. Like you can go hike to the actual summit of that volcano, the one that is active. And I've always been curious to do it because I'm like, how is this possible? Like how, if it has a big boom and there's tons of lava, but I know it's safe. It's just, I'd be interested to see exactly where it is they take you. Um, but yeah, this volcano, I'm trying to think. Yeah, never mind.
No, it's extremely helpful. We were in Buena Vista, Colorado this past weekend, and we did a little bit of a hike. So now I think after that 4 mile round hike that was pretty moderate, I'm ready to climb to the top of the volcano.
Yeah, you should definitely check it out.
That's cool. Okay, I will. No, this is really helpful. And for people who are listening to some of the places that Val had mentioned, she did share some of the places that she stayed that were some of her favorite places. So I will share those in the show notes. So if you're interested to go there, you'll be able to have that right there for you. I think, that was extremely helpful for Guatemala. Would love to transition and just talk more about Alaska. I know a lot of people I know who have gone and everyone's loved it. So would love to hear more from your experiences there, just about it.
Yeah, sure. So I got the opportunity to go work in Alaska during the pandemic as a tour leader because um, tours had not yet picked up in Guatemala after the pandemic in 2020, summer 2021. But in Alaska they had, so my boss offered me to go there and I said, yeah, like you don't have to ask me again. I'm there. And Alaska is just extremely beautiful because of the vast landscapes that you have there. The animals and the wildlife are incredible. And just how remote everything is. It has its own culture as a state because of its just geographical position, and it's super interesting to learn about. The tours that I did were always, it was either like 7 days or 10 days. So we would start in Anchorage, everyone would fly in, stay there a night, and then the next day we would head down to the Kenai Peninsula to Seward, spend some time there. And then some tours would go over to Homer, which is another city on the Kenai Peninsula, but kind of on the other side. And then go up to just, there's very few highways there, so you have to go back up through Anchorage, keep going north up to Denali National Park, and then we spend a few days in Denali, do the bus tour of the national park, and just, look for wildlife, hope to see some grizzly bears or definitely some moose. And yeah, so Alaska is really, really special. Definitely recommend it. I know it's really far and it's quite expensive when you're there, but it's just one of those once in a lifetime trips that I think should be pretty high on everyone's priority list, if you're interested in those aspects.
Yeah, no, that's something I've always wondered, because I feel like whenever I'm talking to some people, and the majority of the time I feel like it's more retirees, just because they're like, hey, I have the time, I'm gonna go. Like, I've
Yeah.
always wanted to do this. Logistic wise, like, what's, I guess you could just say, from Dulles, what does the flight look like? And then once you're there, I know you talked about, going down, then having to come back up through Anchorage and Denali. Like, what do those kind of travel times ballpark look like
Yeah,
logistically?
for sure. So flying from the East Coast, I can't remember what I did, but I know I had a layover somewhere on the West Coast. I think Seattle maybe or something. So I mean, I would compare it even to flying to Europe. It's a long
Okay.
flight within like the 6 to 7 hour realm, with a pretty major time difference. So yeah. And then as for once you get there, that is definitely someplace that you need some wheels of your own, because the distances are pretty large between places, and it's not just, the distances are longer between the drives. So definitely recommend either renting a car or going up with some friends and all getting a car together, or potentially traveling with a small group company, such as the one that I used to work for, who offers these type of group tours. But going from Anchorage to Homer was only about 2 hours, and it's beautiful drives the whole time. And then Homer is about another 2 hours, and then back up through Anchorage, and then from Denali to back down to Anchorage, I think it was around like 6 hours, if I'm not mistaken. We'd stop in a little town called Talkeetna on the way for one night. Talkeetna is, I've never seen the show, but it was the inspiration for the town in Northern Exposure. Have you ever seen that show?
I haven't.
Okay. So
I have to
yeah,
look it
that's what I
up.
told my guests is like a fun fact, but super cute little kind of authentic Alaskan town. But anyway, so the distances are definitely manageable. I mean, there's so much of the state that you could explore if you were, let's say, a fisherman or wanted to go hunting, or just wanted to go to a really remote, like awesome lodge in Alaskan wilderness. But those are the type of places that you need to fly to or take a helicopter. Like there's
Ye-
no highways there. It's so interesting looking at a map of Alaska, or if it's like a road map of Alaska, and just seeing, like, there's literally one highway that goes between Anchorage to Fairbanks, and then there's another highway that goes into Canada, like from a little north of Anchorage. You take the other highway, but like that's pretty much it.
Okay, that's good to know. When you talk about fisherman towns, because I mean, I know I've seen people who have gone and they've done, like, I don't know if they're salmon boat tours or salmon fishing tours or
Yeah, yeah,
deep sea
yeah.
fishing, what they call it, but like, where would you suggest people do that, or what were there specific tours, or is it cruises? Like,
Yeah,
what
for
is that
sure. I
all about?
mean, that's a whole, like, you could have an entire podcast episode like just on it. Um, I mean, there's lots of opportunity in this state. If you don't want to go totally off the beaten track, like what I was mentioning, taking a helicopter to some extremely like fancy lodge, all inclusive type thing, you don't have to do that if you want to go fishing. Like there was tons of tours that I saw when I was in Homer and in Seward, where you could just go fishing for the morning or for the day, or stay at a lodge that is kind of on the tourist track that offers fishing, but isn't someplace that you have to take a helicopter or plane to. So like whatever your level of interest is, or however much you want to spend, or however much time you want to invest in doing some type of like outdoorsy activity, I think you could find your solution for no problem. It's a huge industry, not just the salmon, of course, but like
Yeah.
the tourism surrounding the salmon.
Yeah. Full episode on just salmon. I think that would be,
Yeah.
but no,
Honestly,
that
it would probably be a good one.
right. No, but I think that's a great point. We can connect offline about, who, if there's anybody in the Alaska tourism just around that, or even like just going out, fishing, but also hunting, or just those type of trips. I mean, that would be
Well,
good.
yeah,
to-
and there's another experience that I'd like to share about from that I did in Alaska that was super worth it for anyone who's thinking about traveling there, are these kind of flight seeing, or well, flight seeing is a big one. Like I did a flight seeing trip in Denali National Park, and of course the weather's unpredictable and there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to see Denali. But if you're lucky and it's like a clear day, man, you're flying like right around Denali and seeing like all the peaks that are right outside of your window on the little plane. So that's incredible. And likewise, helicopter tours. Um, and then we did a bear excursion as well. So we took a little flight plane out from I'm not great with like plane lingo, but it was like a beach plane. So it can land on the beach, like a 6-seater or something. We took it from Homer to Lake Clark National Park, which is one of the national parks in Alaska that is not accessible by road. And this is where, if anyone has seen the movie Grizzly Man, have you heard of it?
I bet if I looked it up and I saw it, I would.
So it's this documentary that this guy made of himself, where he really loved the grizzly bears and he went to go live with the grizzly bears in Alaska. And he did not really have the professional experience. Not that anyone you can't even really get the professional experience in living with grizzly bears. But anyway, he filmed himself over a course of several years. I think it was even like 15 years. Every summer he would live with the grizzly bears. He had names for all of them. They shared similar spaces, and never attacked him because it was summertime and the food was plentiful. But anyway, watch the movie if you want to find out how it ends. So we went to this park, which is the same park where he was living, and just went like looking for grizzly bears with a guide. The guide was also the pilot. And it's, again, one of those things. It's nature, it's wildlife. It's not predictable if you're going to be able to see anything or not. But we got super lucky and saw about 16 grizzly bears in one day. And we didn't even have to like hike far. They were just all around, just like eating the grasses. And one of them walked like 15 feet in front of us. She like panned our group, and they don't care about you. I mean, they're obviously aware that you're there, but
Mm-hmm.
they're just trying to eat. Like that's just what they do in the
Yeah.
summertime, is eat, 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 eat. So they're in heaven, and so are you. It's a surreal experience. So those are type of little, excursions that are sometimes hard to justify the extra price for when you've already spent like thousands of dollars to travel somewhere, and you're like, oh, I don't want to spend like another $600 on just one afternoon. But I think those are the excursions that you're going to remember for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
because it just puts you in such a unique position and incredible position. So
100%. And you're probably not gonna, like, you've already spent it to get there. It's like you probably won't. I mean, if you go back, you will, but you know, if you don't, you're not going to get that experience
exactly.
or opportunity again. So now that's cool. Yeah. I mean, I've always wondered about Alaska. I know a few people have gone, but haven't talked to them in detail. So this is helpful for me and helpful for others who want to start to plan trips there. One other question I had, I know summertime, but are there specific like peak tour times? Are there maybe, and this could be, I didn't even ask this for Guatemala, so it'd be good to know just for listeners, for Alaska as well as Guatemala, like when would you say would be kind of the best time to travel, but also similar to like shoulder season in Europe when it isn't peak season where it's so crowded and super expensive? Like, are there other times where you'd say, hey, that's still a good time to travel to it?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I'll start with Alaska since we were just talking about that. And the seasons that you want to travel there it's a lot smaller. Because I mean the weather and also daylight, you
Yeah.
just don't. I mean, some people I've met, have enjoyed traveling to Iceland, for example, in the wintertime where they only have a couple hours of daylight. But anyway, I think June, July, and August are going to be the best months in Alaska. I think probably May and September are also doable. Might not have as much sunny, warm weather, but that's okay. And then in Guatemala, that's Central America, so a lot closer to the equator, obviously. It's quite the opposite. Every time of the year, you're going to have temperatures of 75 to 80 and sunny during the day. And then depending on where you are in the country and what the particular elevation, in Antigua, for example, it's 5,000 feet elevation. So it gets a little, nippy at night, same elevation as Denver. So, up maybe 60s in the evening, you need to bring a little jacket or sweater with you when you go out. However, in the summertime, so what is our summer here on the East Coast would be the rainy season in Guatemala. So let's April to October, it rains every day pretty much. It doesn't necessarily rain for the whole day, or it's not necessarily cloudy or bad weather. It'll be like a really nice, beautiful sunny day, and then it might just downpour for 2 hours or maybe just 40 minutes. So pretty much every day it's going to rain. So it's more popular to visit in the months of like November to March. I would say it would be the best months for pretty much guaranteed like sunny weather every day.
Yeah, that's similar to when we went to Costa Rica. We went into February, so yeah, that's usually like rainy season versus that. But I mean, it's like rainy season sounds like Florida. It just rains every day for a couple hours, and you're
Yeah,
good.
it's
But
honestly not bad. It's just like that volcano hike, for example, you might not want to plan to do that, but for just sightseeing or doing regular things like in the city, I think that it's still totally fine and would be awesome to travel there during the quote unquote rainy season as well.
yeah, and sometimes I mean, for people looking to travel on a budget, sometimes that's when it's going to be less expensive, just because you don't have as many people going
Yeah,
during
for sure.
peak season. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking to do, what your budget is, and what experience you're trying to get out. No, that
Yeah.
those were that that detail and that background just from your experience being a tour guide, that's extremely helpful, not only for listeners but for me and others who are wanting to travel there. I think it'd be good because I know we talked about, I wanted to highlight those pretty in detail, but I think for some people, they haven't even really started. I have friends before I started planning trips years ago who are like, the most west I've been is Ohio. So they hadn't been from, North Carolina. They went from Virginia, North Carolina, and hadn't been west. So we got to experience, Grand Canyon. I've been to Lake Tahoe a few times. Yosemite, I've been to. I know you had been a tour guide at those, and maybe a few others that I may have missed, but would love to just hear kind of, what would you give suggestions for planning different type of hikes there or different things to do in some of those locations from your background?
Yeah, definitely. Um, as far as hiking and like outdoor activities, I think that the National Park Service is an amazing resource for looking up hikes and um, just distances and topographical features of the park. So always going to the website of the national park or visiting their visitor center where you can get a detailed printout of the best or the recommended hikes and what they recommend um, should definitely always be utilized when planning a trip to a national park. There's also usually fun activities that are not necessarily with the national park or in the national park, but if you like rafting or like a Jeep tour or renting mountain bikes or something adventurous in that capacity, just a quick Google search, rafting Yosemite or helicopter Grand Canyon,
Yeah.
something like that is just to be informed of what there is to do in the area. But yeah, there's so many great things. Monument Valley, for example, like doing the Jeep tours in Monument Valley. They're guided by somebody on the Navajo Nation. It's just super interesting. Like, just little extra things like that can enhance your experience. I always try to be sure to look for those.
Yeah, Monument Valley's still one that I want to do. We haven't gotten the chance to. We were in Sedona and went up to Grand Canyon and then went to Antelope Canyon and Horseshoe Bend, but with just the timing we had and I was trying to pull off a proposal, it was tough to make it all the way up to Monument Valley, come all the way back. I think from Page it was a couple hour drive, so just
Mhm.
logistically it was a little bit tougher, but yeah, that's one that I've wanted to do each time I've gone out there but haven't yet. It'd be good to here. I mean, you've done a ton of different hikes, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but like your top three favorite that you've done and you'd suggest everyone do.
Oh gosh. Um,
It can be top one or two. It doesn't have to be top three.
so I think in Zion has probably been the hikes that I have found the most memorable. There's a few. Observation Point is just a hike up to a really beautiful viewpoint of the valley. And then Angel's Landing, of course, is another one that a lot of people have heard of that it's quite memorable. I don't know if you've done it, but there's a portion where you have to kind of grab on with chains, and people think that it's dangerous. It probably is dangerous, but I'm a little more not
Adventurous.
scared of those type of things. Yeah, but anyway, it takes you up to another beautiful viewpoint of the valley. And then of course the Narrows is another hike in Zion that you're doing most of it through a river. So um, you got to get, if you want to go for a long way, like a lot of people just, you can go check it out if you don't want to rent any waterproof boots or waterproof pants. Like you can, if it's a warm day, you can just walk in your boots, or I just wear my chacos and just wade through the rock a little bit. But if you want to keep going and make it like a longer half day hike or a day hike, definitely recommend renting from one of the outfitters just outside the park, the boots and the waterproof pants, so that you're comfortable and not freezing for the entire time. But yeah, so just really memorable because of the hike through a river, and just the slot canyons that you traverse and get to see is super, super cool. So
Yeah. I was gonna say
good.
that's pretty cool. We went to when we lived in Colorado when I was younger, we did the Four Corners and we stopped in Zion on our way back to Colorado. But I mean, I was 8 or 9, so like I remember it a little bit, but didn't get to do the full experience. So I feel like if you go to Zion, you got to go all out and do that.
Yeah, especially if it's a nice day or just a non-rainy day. It's can be extremely dangerous to hike in
Yeah.
Zion when it's raining.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it'd be good too because it's something I'm passionate about. When we were talking before, you were telling me about your current role and just the grand classroom, and I was telling you about how my mom's she got to go over to Madrid, Barcelona, and London last year, and then is going to Australia next year, chaperoning kids at her school and in her county. But would love to hear a little bit more about grand classroom, what you all do, and yeah,
Yeah, for sure. So we are a small ish family owned and operated company here based in Charlottesville, Virginia. There's about 35 employees or so, but we run trips for teachers and for schools, for students all over the country and also internationally. So our most popular destinations are Grand Canyon, Florida Keys, and Washington, D.C. Those are kind of the big three, but we'll do any custom trip that a teacher wants to lead a group of kids to. Um, we work with mostly middle schoolers and high schoolers just because of that younger elementary school age. They're not really traveling yet. So middle school and high school, we do international destinations as well. Costa Rica, done Peru, lots of European destinations, Canada, so yeah. And it's great. I work on the itinerary side. I work directly with the teachers to make sure that the trip is, the itinerary is what they want it to be, support them with registration, kind of be the liaison between the operations team that's doing all the booking components and the teachers. So it's like account management, kind of customer care. And yeah, I love it. It's great. I've been working here for about 2 years now, almost. Um, and love my coworkers, love the work that I get to do. I love that I feel like I'm making an influence or making an impact, or at least working towards a project that is going to make an impact on these students' lives. Getting that feedback from teachers after a trip has gone well, or just them saying that the students loved it, or sometimes students even send thank you notes, or teachers will share photos with you of the kids at the destinations doing the hikes or doing the museum tours or whatever it is that they're doing. Is feels good, and I like it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it goes back to at the beginning when we were talking and you said, my passion is to help people get started traveling earlier and making those memorable experiences. I think it has a huge impact, and I mean it shows, right? That's what you're doing now, and you love it, and you're using all those experiences you've gained over the years being a tour guide, helping and helping others getting travel started earlier, which I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, I got started traveling when we were younger, when my mom put me on skis when we were like 4 years old. So like, but some people don't have the luxury of doing that, right? So I think if you can make an impact through helping teachers who then help them travel, it makes a huge impact. And like studying abroad, I mean, I know we both did that, and from people who have, like, sometimes that's their first exposure to traveling internationally, and it just, once you do that, it gives you the bug, and then you're like, okay, I want to go see more and more and more, and it's cool. So that's awesome that it's coming full circle, and you're getting to leverage all the different experiences you've had, and really make an impact, and especially what your company's doing and helping other people get started traveling younger. And that's the goal with this podcast, is to get people who might be our age, who might be younger, whatever age, to just start traveling. And I think people think it's extremely hard and overwhelming, and right, you just have to kind of take one step at a time versus saying I have to plan this massive trip. It might just be going somewhere for 5 days, but looking at the
Mhm.
bigger picture and just booking a flight and then taking the smaller steps after that. So pretty cool what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't travel with my school, so even seeing that this was like the as big of an industry that it is at the age that I am now, I'm like, wow, this is actually really cool. And it's like I was saying before, kids are just so much more impressionable, and a trip or an experience or even a new set of, having to room with a new group of kids that they might not be best friends with already, like in a hotel room all by yourself, like without your parents, just all these little aspects about traveling. The independence, eating different foods that you're not used to, the responsibility, thinking about what your role is in the whole picture. So it's very, I think, influential for them. And
Yeah.
I would like to think that it's going to make a bigger impact on their lives in the long run with being exposed to it at a younger age and potentially harvesting a stronger interest in it than they may not have otherwise had.
100%. That's perfectly said. And I had our former study abroad professor who had been on 17 study abroad trips, and he had been traveling for like 35 years. And he actually brought the study abroad program to Radford, and he told his
Mhm.
story. But like, he was our professor, as well as Nick Burton's professor the year after in Australia. So it was pretty cool just to hear like the impact and his story and how much of an impact he's made. And people still reach out to him 15 years later, and they're just like, everyone stays in contact with him. And he's someone that, as a college professor, that's probably the one that I remember and whose class was great. And that
Mhm.
we, you still have kind of that bond with the people that you traveled with. So it's pretty cool. I think lastly, would just love to hear from you. I think people sometimes get caught up, like we were talking about, being overwhelmed. But what advice for people would you have if they haven't planned a trip, or they're wanting to, but they're overwhelmed or have anxiety about it? Like, what advice would you have for some of those people, since you've done it for so long?
Um, let's see. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess just don't be scared of the unknown. There's a place might seem far away or complicated or foreign, but like once you get there or once you start reading, doing a little research, even Reddit can be a great resource for just people's opinions and thoughts and kind of ideas. But you realize that it's all been done before, and there are people that want to help you and that want to, want your money, so they're going to be nice to you, you know, give you recommendations, or even don't want your money, but it's
Yeah.
just, it's not just going to be you against the world, or it's easier to travel in most places than people think that it is, because there are lots of resources, even if you don't speak the language, that you can rely on to help you navigate it and figure it out, I guess.
That's well said. I mean, I think you learn over the years, once you get somewhere, you think it's going to be, you're going to get there and not know and just be very overwhelmed. But like you said, there's a lot of people there who will help you, whether it's locals. That's one of my favorite things, is once you get there, getting local recs, you know, working, if you have an Airbnb host, if you have a hotel, usually those people are there because you're bringing tourism to their country,
Exactly.
and they're
Yeah.
willing to help, and they want to have you come back and have a great experience. So no, that was well said. But Val, I appreciate you coming on. This was extremely helpful. Hope our listeners, you know, plan a trip. I know now Guatemala and Alaska are something that's on my list, because, you know, those experiences sound amazing. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll share some of the different resources and places Val stayed within the show notes. Thanks again for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ross. This was super fun. And yeah, it was great to be a part of this. I think it's a great podcast that you've got going on here. So congratulations, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks again. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a rating and review so we can reach more people who are trying to travel. Also, make sure you give us a follow and hit the subscribe button. That way, you're not missing out on any of the upcoming episodes that come out every Wednesday. If you want to sign up for any of the exclusive credit card sign up bonuses that we mentioned, we'll link those within the show notes. And then that way you can get started on your points and miles travel hacking journey quicker. Tune in to next week's episode. Peace.